It is time to finally talk about one of my absolute favorite Happy Meal toy lines ever. Yeah, I've had these guys for a few years now, and well, not a few years, few months now, and I've been wanting to figure out how to review them. I thought maybe I could do it one at a time, maybe I could break them into groups, but no, I think this is the way to do it. Just a full blast to show you everything that would have been able to be found in the Sponge Through Time Happy Meal assortment from Burger King. Look, we all have our favorite Happy Meal line. That's just part of being a kid here in the States, right? You know, some people love the Power Rangers line from the 90s, some people love the Changeables. For some, the best line was something like the Fraggle Rock or the various Garfield or Mario lines, the Disney toy lines from the 90s and early 2000s. But for me and my sisters, it was Sponge Through Time because SpongeBob was one of the few things that all three of us really loved. And more than that, SpongeBob specifically is a character who just kind of works in different looks and characterizations and environments. Now, if memory serves, this line came out around the time of the Dunces and Dragons special, which is the one where SpongeBob and Patrick go back to medieval times. And it's weird that you only have one figure that kind of fits that aesthetic, but it's a cool idea for a toy line. You take a character like SpongeBob and just put him in different eras and different cultures to show what he would look like if he were in that area of both time and the world. It's a really fun concept that made some really cool figures and some not so cool figures. And for the sake of my personal nostalgia, my love of this line, and the fact that I actually think this is still the best SpongeBob toy line ever made, even if it is just a Happy Meal line, I think it's time to give it a little bit of love. Taking a look at our first guy here, I want to say that they actually gave this guy the name Spongevilla, so named after Pancho Villa, but it's Conquistador SpongeBob. Yeah. Mass murdering genocide SpongeBob. That's a pull. A thing about this figure, right? You look at his eyes. There's a very unfortunate stereotype when it comes to English artwork and English recountings of history that Spain, and specifically conquistadors, were all drunks, and they chose to emulate that by showing SpongeBob with the cartoonishly drunk eyes. Also, weirdly enough, he has a big forehead, and I couldn't figure out why he looks so strange to me, and then I realized he doesn't have eyelashes. All his facial hair just moved down to that mustache and beard. It's an interesting enough figure. I do like the detail of the chip in the hat. But you only have one point of articulation there at the waist. And overall, it's just not a particularly fun one, both because of the unfortunate, stereotypes, but also it's just not that interesting. There's other SpongeBobs in this line that are dressed in armor, they have more articulation, better poses. This is definitely one of the lesser figures. I definitely wouldn't start with this one, even though that's exactly what I just did. Now this one I can get behind, Kung Fu Master SpongeBob, with a very stoic expression on his face. This works because, of course, SpongeBob is a martial artist. Granted, he's a karate artist, but Kung Fu is still within the world of martial arts. This kind of fits his characterization in the show. You do only have the 2 points of articulation, right? You have the one hand here and the one arm here. You can get a few different looks, but the only one that looks really good is kind of this one here. In terms of the legs, they don't move. It is kind of hard to balance this guy, but it's still fun. And out of every figure in this line, this is definitely one of the ones that feels more just like SpongeBob in a costume, as opposed to like this is supposed to be a relative or an ancestor of SpongeBob. Keep in mind, this line was called Sponge Through Time, and the idea was that this was supposed to maybe be SpongeBob's ancestors or SpongeBob kind of put into different timelines. For the most part, it gets you some interesting results, but sometimes it also just feels like maybe SpongeBob went to Party City. Now, this one I love. I had this one as a kid. This is supposed to be Grecian statue SpongeBob, seeing him doing the discus at the Olympics, and I like the paint wash. It's kind of sloppy on this version, but I've seen some versions where it actually does give a very cool granite effect. There's definitely more effort put into paint here than some other SpongeBob figures, for better and for worse. However, it's a cool idea, and he's definitely the most standout of all these figures just because he's not the yellow. Him being a little bit taller because of the podium, as well as the gray rock design, really does give him something unique. He does also just have the 2 arms for articulation, but once again, they only kind of look good in this position. But that's okay. I also love the detail of him sticking his tongue out so he can throw. That's very fun. And if you're curious why is SpongeBob naked, well, 1, it's funny to see SpongeBob naked, but 2, it's actually to be accurate to Grecian statues, where the athletes and the heroes were almost always depicted as being naked. So it's a cute little attention to detail. Going to another one I had as a kid, you have the Canadian Mountie SpongeBob. This is awesome. SpongeBob always gets his man. You do, once again, just have the arms, but you also have the legs, which gives you a little bit of character with how you pose this guy standing. That said, he is very front-heavy due to his hat and nose, so it's a little hard to get him standing. That said, it's a very cute design. He doesn't have his eyelashes again, but due to the fact that this is supposed to be such a more serious SpongeBob, I think that's fine. A fun little piece of trivia about this is this actually did cause a very minor stir in Canada. People do not like it when you make fun of the Mounties in Canada, at least certain people within Canada. So whenever they see something that does this, where it's kind of lampooning them, it often is met with criticism, though once again, it was very light and a very small group of people who were complaining. And it really reminds me of the Mountie from WWF, so hey, I'm always happy when SpongeBob can remind me of wrestlers I like. Going from North America to South America, we have Peruvian flute band SpongeBob. He's trying to ward off the Hamstergeddon, don't you know? Yeah, it's probably the only connection I've ever seen between SpongeBob and South Park, but hey, really good paint job and sculpting on this guy. Once again, he's a very unique looking figure throughout this entire line, especially because you have him actually blowing into the pipes. It's really cool, and I don't know, this is just a very fun costume. I think that this works better than a lot of them because it just is very fun and whimsical and kind of goofy. And it's not SpongeBob trying to be, you know, a drunk genocidist or a serious mounted police. It's just SpongeBob playing an instrument. That seems like something that could happen in the show. Now we go to Sultan SpongeBob. I like this one a lot. It's a very cool, almost Disney-esque costume. This looks like a mixture of like Jasmine's dress with Jafar's cape and headdress. And overall, it's just a lot of fun. He only has the 1 arm to articulate, but I think that's fine. It's definitely a very regal-looking SpongeBob, and I kind of like it. Like I said, going west of the Middle East and into the mouth of Africa, we have Pharaoh SpongeBob from Egypt. I love how his headdress has a pineapple on it. This one has a hard time standing up, and yeah, it's SpongeBob doing the Egyptian while he is an Egyptian. It's a very silly visual gag, but it's cool enough. That said, the colors don't really work for me because you have the very dull gold with the yellow, and even though the blue looks nice, it's just a very kind of samey looking figure. Between that and the hard time it has standing up, it's one of the weaker figures in the lot, I'm afraid. Now we're getting to someone special, because this is one of the very few figures in this line where it's not just made up for the toys. This actually appeared in a cartoon either as a costume of SpongeBob or, more specifically, one of his ancestors, because we have Sponge Oog. Now, this actually is a bit of a combination between Sponge Oog and the other caveman SpongeBob. It looks like the one who showed up in Future Shock, but it also looks a lot like the one who showed up in the Caveman special, the BC before comedy. I think it definitely looks more like the original Sponge Oog, so I think that's more what they were going for, especially with the more angry design, and I quite like it. It has a very simple paint scheme, nothing on the brown leotard. There is a mark here on the arm, but I think that's just an imperfection on the plastic. Overall, though, it's really solid. He's shorter than most of the other figures because he has a more hunched expression, but I love that his arms, his knuckles are literally dragging the ground. He looks a lot more agitated. And, like I said, even though this line was made to celebrate dunces and dragons, there's not actually a figure that looks like SpongeBob did in that special, so it's weird that there's a few other specials that are kind of referenced here with the costumes. So, overall, this is a really solid figure, and if you want a good version of Sponge Oog or any other caveman SpongeBob, your options are basically this guy or the shorter Super 7 version who has about the same amount of articulation, but is, like I said, a good bit smaller. Keeping with costumes that you would have actually seen in the show, we have Viking SpongeBob. And if you remember the Bubble Buddy episode, it looks near identical to what he wore when he woke up for Leif Eringston Day. I don't know if that was intentional, but the details are so similar that I had to think it is. Very cool sculpting on the go for a Happy Meal. You do have like a nice cape here on the back. There's no articulation on this guy save for the legs, and you can't do much there. But he definitely gets by on pure presence. It's a very solid looking SpongeBob that has a very unique look, and the horns do give him a little bit of height. And once again, there is the added caveat that this one actually showed up in a cartoon and wasn't just made by a toy designer, which always gives it a little extra level of authenticity. Well, the good times had to stop rolling somewhere. Now we have Samurai SpongeBob, and this might be one of my least favorite figures from the entire line. I don't know what it is, nothing's really working for me here. The expression's kind of weird. I do like the fact that his tongue is out, but that's about it. He's a paler yellow than the other figures. The fact that, he can't articulate at all is definitely kind of a drawback. And even though, the costume is cool, it's just, I don't know. There's not a lot of whimsy here. We already have a martial artist SpongeBob, so if you wanted to go samurai, maybe give him, a sword, or, a war flag or something. And instead, he's just doing, a generic, I'm gonna beat you up kind of hand pose. It's fine, but definitely one of the lesser examples, I think. Mariachi Band SpongeBob. This one's fun enough. Granted, SpongeBob's never been in a mariachi band, but if you've ever seen the movie, he did save a mariachi band, and they provide the soundtrack of all the sea creatures killing the Cyclops. Decent sculpted detail on the guitar, very fun looking SpongeBob. That said, his arm looks really weird bending over for the guitar, and there's no articulation on the go, not even in the legs. So, it's fun, it's a cool looking one, but that's all it can do, is look cool. It's, not even as articulated as some of its contemporaries in this line. Now we finally get to the poster child of this line. Like I said, the Sponge Through Time toy line was made to celebrate the Dunces and Dragons special, which is the medieval SpongeBob episode with Planktonomore. The thing is, right, SpongeBob had a knight's costume in that. He had two knight's costumes, actually, and neither one of them were this. This does look a little bit more like the one the blacksmith gave him, but that one, of course, had huge legs and had a different plumage. Overall, though, for just a knight SpongeBob, this looks fine, and it kind of reminds me of the knight armor Shrek wore when he was fighting Dragon, just with the way the helmet's hiding everything but his nose and eyes. And I do like the fact that his shield does have that color scheme as well as the pineapple on it. Very fun, and he does have a pointer finger, which is always kind of cool. He does have articulation in all his arms and legs, but it's very stiff. So I don't want to mess with it too much because I am worried about breaking it because, once again, these are Happy Meal toys, and they're not necessarily known for their quality or their long-livedness. Now we have Pirate SpongeBob, and this is an interesting one. I believe it was the episode Nautical Nonsense, where Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob, and Patrick pretend to be pirates and they go to dig up treasure. And that's the one where, of course, you got, "Oh, east? I thought you said west." It's west, Patrick. And when you look at this costume, this isn't what SpongeBob wore in the episode. It's what Mr. Krabs wore in the episode, with Patrick's eye patch. So it's almost like it's a reference to all three of the characters at once, giving SpongeBob most of Mr. Krabs' costume and the map that Mr. Krabs was using, as well as the eye patch that Patrick got to wear. It's kind of fun in that way. Once again, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it would be really cool if that was the case, and it's still a really fun figure if it's not. He has a great pose that's unique to the others. I like the fact that he has the eye patch, and it's just a super solid one. Not one of the best, but definitely in the upper half of this group. Now, this was another one I had as a kid, Royal Guard SpongeBob. A lot of fun. Now, he actually does have two articulated arms as well as articulated legs. That's pretty fun. It definitely feels like a sister piece to the Mountie SpongeBob. Overall, this one's fun just because of the big hat, and it does help him stick out if he's in a group shot, but other than that, it feels like everything I could like about this figure, the Mountie does better. Mountie has a better expression, I like his red better, I like his hat better, I like what he's doing with his hand better, but this is still an interesting enough SpongeBob, and hey, if you're a British SpongeBob fan, I bet this is kind of fun to see. There are two SpongeBob figures in this line that I joke were predicting future episodes. We're gonna get to the second one in a minute, but this one really reminds me of the episode where SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs, Patrick, and all the others were using Gary as a sled dog. I forget what that one's called. But yeah, it's supposed to be Eskimo SpongeBob, all bundled up in a parka, trying his best not to freeze in the cold while using skis. It's definitely fun. It almost looks more like SpongeBob in Iceman stage from Mega Man as opposed to an Eskimo SpongeBob, but hey, it works. Also, I do like his expression, just showing just how freezing he is in spite of the layers. It's a silly one, no articulation on the go, but it's kind of saved by just how expressive it is, as well as the colors used. Another one I had as a kid, it's Australian SpongeBob, Crocodile Dundee SpongeBob. This still kind of works for me. Now, I could be crazy, but I could swear that there was some point where Steve Irwin talked about SpongeBob. And I don't think it was like in an episode or anything, but I want to say that the Crocodile Hunter had something where he just talked about SpongeBob and then they used that as a promo. But maybe I'm insane. Other than that, you know, it's funny. It's just SpongeBob in an Outback uniform throwing a boomerang. Only way this gets more offensive is like if he had a Foster's and was talking about drop bears, but hey, if you need khaki SpongeBob, this is your guy. Representing the people of Germania, this is Ludwig von SpongeBob. You need to make fun of Beethoven somehow, I guess, and let's be honest, considering the conquistador SpongeBob over there is a lot more offensive directions they could have taken German SpongeBob. Let's just be grateful they went this way. But no, this is funny. He doesn't have his eyelashes, but it kind of works for me just because he has the wig on and he has this very kind of proud, smug look about him. That's something funny about this. This is the SpongeBob that Squidward sees in his nightmares. Accomplished composer SpongeBob. Also, I like the color layout a lot. The purple really does pop on this guy. So overall, really solid. And you have use of all four limbs, which is also really nice. Can't complain about this guy at all. USA! 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 Yeah, it's Statue of Liberty SpongeBob. It's a fun one. I like this. He just has the one articulated arm. The green doesn't really mesh with the yellow for me, but it's fine. He does actually just have the actual inscription on the tablet. It would have been fun if, like, maybe they instead put on the date that SpongeBob debuted or something, but, you know, that's asking for a lot from a Happy Meal. I gotta say, though, it's a solid one. Statue of Liberty SpongeBob kinda works. This is the second figure I joke about this toy line predicting the special of, because not too long after this special, they did, what was it, Wild West Sponge or something? And that introduced Sponge Buck, the cowboy ancestor to SpongeBob in Bikini Gulch. And he wore a very similar costume to what we see here. It's fun. Just cowboy SpongeBob, you can make it look like he's crying, or you can make it look like he's square dancing. Why not? You gotta square dance when you're a square. It's definitely a sillier one. I like this guy a lot just because he looks so fun and doofy. You gotta, like, enjoy the SpongeBobs that kind of lean into it. Also, I do like how he has the bivalve as his belt buckle there. That leaves just one SpongeBob, and it's the SpongeBob from what I believe was the first 30-minute special. This is the pilot outfit he wore in The Sponge Who Would Fly when he was going to first try his flying machine that got shot down by Old Man Jenkins before he started flying using his pants. Yeah, Pilot SpongeBob looks really good. I love the brown, the two separate tones of it, as well as the scarf kind of swept to the side. It's a very cool look. Not much on the go, but I appreciate it for just kind of being a callback to an earlier special, kind of like Sponge Oog was. So there it is, my favorite SpongeBob toy line and my favorite Happy Meal line of all time. These guys really are something special.